Hi guys, and welcome to the Mind Blowers podcast. I wanted to do a special edition this time because of the boxing fight between Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. So I'm no boxing expert, but I want to talk about it from a different perspective. From the perspective of future technologies within rejuvenation and within longevity. I was quite sad to see the fight, to be honest. I had really rooted for Mike Tyson to win. He's definitely one of the boxing legends, and with Jake being a bit of a heel, I think everything was set up for people wanting Mike Tyson to win. It was a bit painful to see how Mike Tyson actually did quite well in the first two rounds, and then it seemed like he was kind of hurt, his knee was not quite okay, and you could kind of see age catching up with him. I mean, there's no doubt that a prime Mike Tyson would make very short work of Jake Paul. So for me, it's not so much a victory for Jake Paul. Not that I really have anything against Jake Paul, I don't. I think it's a victory for aging. So it's aging 1, Mike Tyson 0, because you kind of saw that, age was the main factor here. His endurance, his speed, his power was not the same as before. But then I thought about, is this really the case? Or is the case actually that what Mike Tyson showed us here is that it's Mike Tyson 1, aging 0? And the more I think about it, I actually think it's the latter that is the case, and that is what we should focus on. I gave myself the crazy question, could we see a rematch between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson in the future with a different result, with a result where Mike Tyson would dominate a younger Jake Paul? Could we even see such a fight in the more far future, like say 16 years from now in 2040? Okay, so I know at this point many of you are going to say you're absolutely crazy, you don't know anything about fighting. Of course we will not see a Mike Tyson in his 70s beat a Jake Paul in his 40s. It is simply impossible. But stay with me for a while and let's try to dive into the rabbit hole of rejuvenation therapies. So why would it even be thinkable that Mike Tyson could actually perform well in a rematch? Well, the reason it is thinkable is because we have more and more people who are talking about rejuvenation technologies that will not reset the aging clock, but first stop the aging process and later reverse it, so that you actually become younger for every year that you live. I know this still sounds crazy to most people, and it may not happen in the next 20, 30 years, but more and more people in the field are starting to say that this is a real possibility. So for example, you have people like Kurzweil who think this will happen within 6, 7 or 8 years. You have Aubrey who thinks it's going to happen in about 12 to 15 years. And you have more and more people joining this club and say, this is a real possibility. We also have Brian Johnson, for example, where we are seeing that many of his biomarkers are getting back to peak levels, even though he's in his 40s. So something is definitely happening. So I thought, let me dive further into this rabbit hole of boxing and rejuvenation. So try to look at this chart. It shows boxers who meet significantly younger opponents. And so looking at the chart you see here, of course, the most extreme is definitely Mike Tyson. We also see that most of the older fighters, they lost. The younger opponents marked out in red here, we can see they generally won all the matches. Unless the standout here is Bernard Hopkins, who in 2014 actually defeated a 19-year younger opponent. I just watched that match. I mean, what Bernard has is just amazing fight IQ. So I think it's not so much about strength, it's simply about ring IQ, but of course with a very good physique for somebody being 49. But what I noticed is, the further we go down in history, the rarer these fights become, where you have a much older opponent fighting a younger opponent. So it does seem that it is becoming possible for older people to compete with younger people, even though they tend to lose. Alone the fact that they can actually enter the ring and not getting knocked out by a much younger opponent could be due to rejuvenation therapies. So my first theory or thesis would be that without new technologies, Mike Tyson would have simply been knocked out by Jake Paul. The age difference would have been too huge, and it would have been short work for Jake Paul to simply knock out Mike Tyson. The question is, how many rejuvenation therapies and new technologies did Mike Tyson actually use in his training up to the match? And it seems nobody really knows. I tried to research this, but there are no clear answers. But what I did come up with is that it is likely that new technologies were used. On the other hand, it could be that Mike Tyson surrounds himself by more old school people. But I'm still guessing that some of these therapies would have been used to get him into shape where he was actually able to compete with a much younger opponent like Jake Paul. So some of these therapies could be stem cell therapy, which basically the benefit would be that you regenerate damaged tissues a lot quicker. So it really enhances your recovery. So it means you can train and build muscle at a whole nother level than without some stem cell therapy. It is likely that Mike would have used some of this to get into shape that he was. Another kind of, I don't know if you would call it a technology, it's more of a supplement, would be NAD boosters of different kinds. So the benefit is it restores energy and endurance, but at a cellular level, and the impact will also be quite high. So we'll come back to how proven these technologies actually are, but there are pretty solid evidence that both these would work, and that the impact for Mike Tyson of using these technologies would be quite high in a boxing match. And then there's cryotherapy, and again, it will have a little less impact than the two first, but it will reduce inflammation, and again, it will speed up recovery. So a lot of this is about actually putting the body in a younger state where you recover quicker, so you can train a lot harder. So it's not basically making you that much younger in your biology. Maybe the NAD boosters would, but we're not talking about a breakthrough where you get younger every year. This is not longevity, escape velocity. And of course, AI-powered training, so really using AI to analyze the impact you want and how you should train. This is an obvious one that you would implement as well in today's boxing. And then you have different forms of plasma therapies. Again, the main benefit is to heal injuries and accelerate recovery. We both know that Mike Tyson have been injured a couple of times during the match, and he was not during the match, but before the match leading up to it, even coughing blood and so on. So this has probably been quite important. So what I'm thinking is, without modern technologies, we would not have seen a Mike Tyson in the ring at all. This is why when we go back in history, we don't see people in their late 50s entering the boxing ring. So I think number one, it's a victory for Mike just getting in the ring and actually not getting knocked out. So anyway, I don't know if the match was fixed or not, but I think he got in there, he stood his ground, he actually won a couple of rounds, so it was not like a complete slaughter. So I think getting into that shape, just looking at how his body looked at 58, I think, there's some victory there where we're seeing different forms of technologies making that happen. So I would say that Mike Tyson probably performed more like a 45-year-old or 50-year-old Mike Tyson than a 58-year-old due to the use of different technologies. So I think if Mike Tyson had lived a much more healthy life than he has, I mean, this could probably have been reduced down to the 40-year-old level. but I think his starting point was not that great. But of course, he has a fantastic physique, which has helped him. So looking at these therapies, here we see them in a table, and of course it's difficult to measure the exact rejuvenation effect, so it is just an estimate, and this will be individual as well for different people. And you can see how much evidence there actually is. So of course, like with NAD boosters, it's like it looks promising, but we actually don't know whether it works or not. We are still early in all these technologies. But let's try to estimate some more numbers. So, I mean, if you win or lose a fight in boxing, is normally down to different attributes. You've seen this in games, obviously, and the real world, of course, is more complicated. But anyway, you can look at the speed of boxers, the power, the endurance, the agility, the reflexes. Ring IQ is obviously very important. Your chin, which means your ability to actually take punches. And then your defense, and finally your footwork. So looking to the left here, we have prime Mike Tyson, obviously obese and one of the greatest of all time. Whether he was the best of all time, I'm not going to argue for against that, but he was definitely one of the best. And we could compare him to Usyk, who's the current world champion, and they are very evenly matched. I mean, nobody could really say who would win of those two. Then we have Jake Paul, significantly weaker than, for example, prime Mike or Usyk, so that he thinks he can become world champion. I think it's pretty unrealistic. But then when we compare current Jake Paul to Mike Tyson at 58, we can still see that Jake Paul seems to be a stronger boxer, right? He has more speed, he has slightly more power at this point, his endurance is better, his reflexes and agility is better. His ring IQ is probably not as good as Mike Tyson because like he's not such an experienced boxer. His defense, his chin, defense and footwork, everything actually looked a little bit better for Jake Paul, I think, in the match than it did for Mike Tyson, at least after a few rounds. But what would happen if we actually reach longevity escape velocity, which means that we can rejuvenate every year, so we actually become younger every year? Then it would be a major game changer for old veterans like Mike Tyson to box against younger fighters, like, for example, Jake Paul, right? So longevity escape velocity is still theoretical. We don't know whether we'll get there in, some say 5 years, some say 10, some say 15, some say 20, some say never, right? So we don't know, but let's follow the thought lines of, for example, Aubrey the Grey, who says it could happen around 2036. So if that happened in 2036, it would probably mean that up to that point we would be able to reduce the speed of aging quite a lot in an individual like Mike Tyson. Especially, he would also have more time to actually become super healthy. I think he went a little bit from like a not very healthy lifestyle to all this hard training. So, but after let's say 2036, if we have breakthroughs there that can literally take your biological age 20 years back or something similar, which is what Aubrey the Grey suggests, what would then happen? We can look a little bit at the technology again. So it's many of the same things. So one of the first treatments will be getting rid of the zombie cells in your body. Stem cell therapies will be much more evolved. We'll know more about how to lengthen our telomeres. We will know more about cognitive enhancement as well, which is really important in terms of both the reflexes, but also actually increasing your ring IQ with age. AI training systems will be better. But the most important thing is that we will actually rejuvenate the body. It will become younger year by year. So this is very complex to say to what extent this will actually work. But again, if you follow the positive scenario from let's say Kurzweil or Aubrey the Grey, then definitely Mike Tyson would be younger biologically by 2040 than he is now. So let's say he is biologically 49-year-old right now instead of being 58. Then you could probably stay at that level by really changing your lifestyle. I'm basically talking about Mike Tyson living like Brian Johnson is living. If you know Brian Johnson, he is like the most measured person in the world, trying all sorts of therapies. So he can probably do a lot of stuff to temporarily become younger in his biology. And then when we reach 2036, he would then get a pretty large boost due to these new technologies. So a Mike Tyson with rejuvenation, what would he become? Would he go back to being the beast, the greatest of all time? Probably not. It's simply a little bit too late, you could say, or you could say we're not far enough into the future for something like that to be possible. But it does seem like it's a possibility that he could in 2040, using every available technology and with major breakthroughs happening in the mid-30s, reach a better level than he's at now, so that the Mike Tyson of 2040 could be a better fighter than the Mike Tyson of 2024. I know this sounds crazy, and this is why I wanted to make this video, because I wanted to visualize what it is people like Aubrey the Grey, David Sinclair, Ray Kurzweil, what they're actually saying. And I would love to see your reactions. I don't mind somebody in the comments saying this is nonsense, it's never going to happen, it's crazy. Maybe it is. We'll see, time will tell. But this is what these people are actually proposing. So looking at the stats, we could see a Mike Tyson in 2040 who would definitely beat a current day Jake Paul. The other thing is, of course, Jake Paul using these technologies would also improve. I mean, even though he's at peak age now, you know, the training regimens and so on would actually make him a much better athlete if he followed them in 2040. So we can see the stats here. So it would actually be quite close. It's not clear who would win that. But if these things happen, a rematch in 2040 between two more powerful individuals than we saw on Friday, a much more powerful Mike Tyson and a slightly more powerful Jake Paul, they could have a rematch. Who would win that rematch? It would be very close. I actually favor Mike Tyson in that rematch, so maybe 60% for him to win and about 40% chance for Jake Paul. Will this happen? I think nobody knows. I'm probably on the skeptical side that science will develop so quickly that this will actually happen by 2040. I think we need a little bit more time. I don't think it's in the cards for Mike Tyson to do this. That said, if Mike Tyson decided to follow a regimen like Brian Johnson, for example, who knows? I mean, he could probably lower his biological age as it is right now if he was willing to follow a regimen like that. And then if we get these breakthroughs, nobody knows when they will come, but if they come in 10 to 15 years, like more and more people believe, you know, well, who knows? Maybe the rematch for Mike versus Jake 2040 could actually be on. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Thanks for listening.